Okay, so welcome everybody. It's mid-May 2023. I'm Daniel Four, and here with the Ancestral Medicine Network and some other practitioners in the network. And we have up to 90 minutes set aside for us to share a bit about how it is to work professionally, ritually with the ancestors and all that, and share about the training that we offer through the organization, allow time for questions, and I believe allow a little time for guided practice. And before we dive in with that, I'm going to make a prayer because that's how I like to do it, especially if there's going to be any practice and we're talking about the ancestors. It's good to actually acknowledge them and not just talk about them. So if you would, even though we're not in some super focused, intense ritual mode, it's still good to pause for a moment. So join me in that if you would. Give acknowledgement to the holy mystery within me and within all others and all beings and all things. Give acknowledgement to my own ancestors, to people of blood and the other traditions to which I'm connected. Give acknowledgement to the ancestors who are and who speak through the land here in La Subia, La Provincia de Granada, and Andalucía, en el sur de España. Give acknowledgement to the helpful powers that back my life. I give a warm welcome to our presenters, Alicia, Melissa, Orson, and Daphne, and to the people traveling with everybody present here, listening in later as well. May it be a kind and connective gathering, and may the deep necessity for healing on this earth organize what we're doing here, keep it focused, keep it relevant, kind, and connective. Thanks. Shane. So welcome again. I'm going to say 5, but it might end up being like 10 minutes just to say something about the training, who I am, what we're doing here, before turning it over to our 4 guests to each share a little bit. And then we'll have a lot of time for questions after. If folks are in places where the power's in and out or something happens with the internet, know that you'll get the full recording after. So no stress, and you can write in questions. Personally, I'm down lineage from early English and German settler colonialists in North America. I was born and raised in the state of Ohio. I've lived in other places in California and North Carolina. I've traveled, studied in other countries a little bit. And but I wasn't raised with any framework for relating with the ancestors. I sought out ritual and things like it, even as a teenager, and had the good fortune to crash into teachers and practices that met me well when I was early in life. And so I dove in and have stayed involved. In addition to being a student of ritual over the last 25 years, I'm 45 now. It's been 30 years. I also did a PhD in psychology. I'm a licensed therapist, or dormant license, but I got licensed. And so I know that world a bit too. I'm a student of history and the earth and things like that. I'm also a parent, so I have 2 young girls, and I live here with my wife in southern Spain. We moved here in September of last year, and that's good. We're glad about it. And briefly, in my process of coming back into relationship with my own ancestors of blood, the recent ones and also the much older ones, especially, I realized early on in that it was a really kind of stunning and life reorganizing sense of reconnection and belonging that came from that. And after some years of working with my own ancestors from the late 90s until 2004 or 5, I started assisting others who wanted that support in engaging in a process that was similar to what I was doing of cultural recovery in partnership with the ancestors. And then I taught that for about 11 years until I got pestered in a fruitful way to start training others in how to guide that. So in 2016, in addition to writing a book about all this, I started to guide others in what I call the Ancestral Healing Practitioner Training, which is the training that's entering the 7th year or 7th cycle in this fall. And it's basically focused on how to guide really effective session work, one-on-one session work for others. but it also includes how to guide small group process and how to guide like introductory teachings, how to talk about the work in different settings, how to integrate it into different kinds of spaces. But the work is essentially a guided ritual repair process with blood lineage ancestors. It can be adapted to other kinds of ancestors and other kinds of needs, but that's the foundation of it. And it arises out of my own process of getting reconnected culturally through working with my ancestors, and then through guiding some thousands of people through that as a main focus for 20 years or so. And so there's a lot of just direct data or like field work, or like there's a lot of logged hours doing ancestor focused ritual and sessions. And so that's maybe I want to try to be succinct. Let me say a few other things. The work is, as I hold it and as we participate in that and Ancestral Medicine Network, because there's about 180 people in the first 6 training cycles and cohorts that are in the network. So of those 180 people, there's maybe 70 or 80 who have completed their certification. The rest are either active in that training process or, or less active for whatever reason. And one thing it means a lot to me is that the work is currently available in about 15 languages from folks from about 20 countries. It means a lot to me to decenter the United States, to decenter English language arrogance and imperialism, to keep the work economically accessible so that it's really class aware and really meeting people of different economic means, and to hold the work in a way that's intentionally really skeletal or bare bones so that it's adaptable to different cultural environments. And I think we're achieving that. It's really very encouraging, despite the challenges that come, to be in a network of international ritualists who are focused on delivering cultural and ancestral family healing services, and how to do that in a skillful way. So that's happening. The training itself, we talked through a lot of those elements in the earlier video and teaching that happened in February. That's up on the website and accessible. So I'm not going to talk in a boring way through all the elements of that here, unless folks have certain questions, besides to say that there's like a 9-month immersive part, and then a part where you're guiding sessions for the public with a bit of supervision, and then eventually we're like, yeah, you know what you're doing, you complete your certification, and then the training part is essentially done. Of course, it's ongoing learning, but you can stay as connected or as minimally connected as you wish to the network per se. People make use of the training in a lot of different ways, and it's my intent that it be really simple as possible, while still getting to the heart of the matter, that it's serious ritual work. It can be very joyful, but there are actual risks and hazards. I'll say one other thing before I turn it over to the presenters. All the steps that the practitioners train in are written out in a book. It's been translated into almost 10 languages. It's in the online course. In some ways, it's very straightforward. So people are like, well, why you got to do all this fancy training around it? Well, if you just followed the steps diligently, it would work fine 9 out of 10 times. It's the 10th time that the training is for, in a lot of ways. It's how to work with complex cultural trauma, how to work with troublesome spirit interference, how to help people who really don't feel like they can connect, how to navigate all the unexpected kinds of things that can happen when you're actually relating with the actual ancestors and not just an idea about them. This work has psychological elements, but it is fundamentally relational. We are relating with the actual ancestors, not an idea about them, not a generalized symbolic sense of them, not an impression that they're like just a knowing field as like a general kind of vibe or something. We're relating with them. And reclaiming that understanding, if you haven't been nurtured along with it from your childhood, can be all kinds of things, and scary and disruptive and initiatory and, all kinds of things. So it's the unpredictable stuff that the training intends to especially get at, in addition to just foundational skills on how to hold a safe, connective, and culturally proficient space for others. So let me say that much. We have a good time with it, and I don't want to monologue it too much, besides to say that I'm happy you're here. I hope you feel well met, and it's good to see some faces of folks who are already in the upcoming cohort. And I look forward to meeting you and getting to know you a bit more. The application itself has been open for just a few months, and it'll be open through the summer, but not beyond. We begin in October. So let me turn it over first to Alicia, and our fearless tech host, Michael, will drop Alicia's bio in the chat. And you could say, if you want, anything about your background, but I won't take up a lot of space to do personal introductions for people. But glad you're here, Alicia. Thanks.
Thanks, Daniel, and thank you for inviting me here to speak. My people come from India. My recent ancestors come from India and Persia, and I'm situated here in Vancouver Island, the land of the Comox First Nations people, Aixan and Tsatlut, some of the tribes first tribes here. And I did my training, I want to say it was 2 falls ago. And it's been amazing. It was an amazing training. I really want to echo what you just said about the ritual practices are such an important piece, and the relating with the ancestors for me has been the sweetest. Deepening with them is like an everyday practice in order to really hold this work for clients. And this was a skill I didn't understand. I had done lots of work I'd worked in the non-for-profit field prior to this. It's been about 10 years plus. And I was used to working with humans in this way of relating, but relating with the ancestors as this unseen consciousness, and also making that relationship more conscious for me has been the most beautiful piece. It's provided me a sense of confidence that I didn't know was possible. Leaning into that space of belonging and familial connection for me has been, just profound. So I'll say that about the personal empowerment. In my experience, my ancestors, I mean, everybody's ancestors are different, and they're quite loud. They're loud teachers for me. So they're not just these teachers that are just there kind of giving me all the things that I'm doing right. They're also kind of correcting me and letting me know the things that I could do better. So when I did the practitioner training, it was a lot of encouragement to like not do a lot of the caretaking, how to lean into their support and resource them is one I continue to build that relationship in order to hold this work in a more beautiful way. The other part I want to talk about is ritual and practices each day, and how that's really, again, supported this feeling of empowerment for me. My practices were really simple in the beginning, with just tending an altar. And I started doing courses with Daniel even before I did the practitioner training, as a way to just understand how to deal with sort of cultural trauma and burdens, and not like trying to seek some answers in that way. And for me, the practices have really been dialing in connection to the earth, simple practices of just like laying my belly on the grass, and connecting to the water spirits. And these have been so monumental in supporting that deeper connection with my ancestral kin. So after saying that, I want to talk about cultural healing a little bit, and how that's been super beautiful to see some of the clients that I'm doing this work with, I think one of the clients reflected to me that I'm not sitting here receiving instructions from some guru. These are my own people that I'm receiving instructions from of how to lead my life, how to move through these burdens, specific instructions that I'm getting of what offerings to make. And that just is this huge, like, for me, as a settler person coming, having lived in different countries, and now having come here, that's so beautiful to hear somebody else find a way to connect to the root, claim those parts that were hidden and lost. And that one of the things that I see in this work, and it's happened for me in my own life, is really honing in voice, but voice that's not just regurgitated, yeah, voice that's connected to to your heart, to your belly, your feet, and your roots, the people that are behind you, supporting you. Um, so yeah, and it's been wonderful to do it for myself and to hold other people in this and see how their own craft. So their own craft has deepened in honing in this relationship with their ancestors. Um, that change that people experience um, is amazing. It's why I do what I do now, and it brings me great joy to do it. After each session, I'm feeling great joy and and connected to my own soul in doing this work, which I didn't have. I was looking for that in when I was doing more non-for-profit work. So it's got that piece of really um, people seeking in and leaning back into their own um, cultural ways of tending. Yeah. Uh, and it's been really, really beautiful to see people claim that relationship with deities from their cultural backgrounds and to see them reclaim language, you know. Yeah, I'll share a little there for right now and answer some more questions if somebody's feeling like they want to ask a question. But for right now, that feels okay to share till there. And I mean, I'm recommending if people are considering doing this course and this training, and you feel the call, I really do feel it's a vocational call. At least that's the way it's felt for me with taking up this practitioner training. I went into it with very little, with thinking maybe I'll pursue this training 3 years from now, and put in my application and things rolled through. So um, I responded to an inkling, is what I'm saying. So yeah, yeah. Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks, Alicia. Yeah, I'm happy for you and for what you shared. I'm just remembering I think you're in the fifth cohort or fourth, can't remember, fifth. And but by that time, I wasn't doing the one-on-one mentorship in the same way because things had grown a bit. But I remember like initially, like listening to your interview and you're the kind of incoming trainee that I often enjoy mentoring because you have already, you can navigate being in the world, you know, like the nonprofit world, like you can navigate the systems and you have a base from which to receive the work. But the growth edges, I remember it, one of them was around stepping into being a ritualist. It's kind of like all the kindling is here, but I'm not really sure what to do with it. I'm like, yeah, light it. And like, talk to them directly, see what happens. And
Yeah.
and in this, as a mentor, is very satisfying because when people are in a place in their journey where they're ready to activate that, it's great. Other people come in, they're like, whoa, I've been talking to spirits for 50 years. I need some grounding and some tools. I'm like, great, we can help with that too. They're not struggling to be a ritualist. They're just like, they need the nuts and bolts of how to make it grounded. But anyways, just appreciating that activation of that capacity being part of your path. And it's great to see that flourishing for you. So congrats.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you, Daniel.
Yeah. Melissa?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm in Melbourne. It's super early and super cold here. So hi from the Southern Hemisphere. I just want to begin by acknowledging country. I'm on Boon Wurrung country of the Kulin Nation, and acknowledging any First Nations people who are here or are watching later on. Thanks for having me, Daniel. So much to say. Just to begin, echoing Alicia, I was also cohort 5. We didn't actually cross paths so much. This work is just really, truly beautiful. It's beautiful work, and it's joyful, and it's heart-filling and soul-filling. And so just to echo Alicia, if you're thinking about doing it, sign up, apply and join. Particularly if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, this is the one for you because the timing hopefully will suit us better. When I did my training, the timings were hard. I'm just going to change how I can see. Yeah, good. So bit about me. I am a Jewish woman living in Melbourne, Australia. I'm 7th generation on some lineages in Australia. My people are from Eastern Europe, from Ukraine, Russia, Poland, that kind of area. I have a few strands in my practice. I'm a qualified acupuncturist, and I practice as a Chinese medicine healer. I'm also a witch, and I've been practicing as a witch for about 25 years, alone and also in circles. I'm also a ritualist, so I run a lot of different sacred circles and different rituals and rites of passage work. And I work on country, so I do bush solos or wilderness solos and a lot of ritual work on country. So that's to say that I've been doing healing work. I kind of don't like that phrase, but I've been working in the healing fields for approximately 30 years. Before I was an acupuncturist, I was actually, feels like a lifetime away, but I was actually a qualified solicitor. And I also have a degree in psychology. So I've been kind of, as Daniel would say, crashing around in these fields for some time. And so, some of my friends said to me, so why would you want to do this particular training? Is it's just another training that you're adding to your toolbox? It could have felt that way, and it might seem that way from the outside. What this training has brought to me is a groundedness that I knew I needed, and I didn't know how to find. So I'm probably in the latter camp of what Daniel was just speaking to. I've had a number of different spiritual teachers, and I've done quite a lot of, some training in different spiritual practices, including my own practice, which is Judaism. But I tended to be up in the realms. I was very, I thought I was grounded, and at times I was, but I was very up in the realms and dealing with everyone up there. Coming into direct relationship with my own ancestors has been transformative personally, but also professionally. It's really, I was thinking about it yesterday. I was just reflecting on my clinical practice. So I run a private practice, and I have done for 14 years in Melbourne. And for the first time in my life, I feel a stability in my practice, which I've never felt before. So coming into direct relationship with my own people has just kind of really landed me. It's landed me in my Judaism in a way, it's very touching for me, in a way I didn't know was possible. I was brought up in a Jewish family and went to Jewish school and, all the kind of stuff, but coming into direct relationship with my own people has changed me in ways I didn't know was possible. And I look at myself and I'm kind of like, who even are you now? Like everyday prayer, and I can't believe I'm even doing this, but going back to synagogue and just really having a conversation with my people it's like having the grandparents the great grandparents and the people that I never had, and feeling them around me is just the sweetest, just the sweetest. And so what that has done for me professionally means that I can hold my ground when I meet my clients now in a way I thought I was doing, but I wasn't doing. What that has meant in terms of people coming to me is, as I said, my practice is flourishing, which is a delight for me. It's just really nice to feel the consistency and the stability of my clinical practice. I am a little bit of a purist. I don't like to mix things so much. So I call myself a medicine weaver, but I have a lot of respect for different practices. So when I'm doing acupuncture, for the most part, I'm doing acupuncture. When I'm doing ancestral lineage healing, I really do ancestral lineage healing. I don't want to be too over the top about my gratitude for Daniel, but I think he knows how I feel. I just really believe in this as a methodology. It really works. As I said, I've done a lot of different healing training and practices, and this one just works. I have the kind of clientele I attract, for whatever reason, it's always been my style, usually have a lot of trauma. I end up with a lot of clients with sexual abuse in a lot of different ways, and a lot of cultural trauma kind of within the Jewish community, a lot of Holocaust trauma. I end up with people with a lot of physical chronic ailments in my acupuncture practice, and also in my ancestral lineage healing practice. And this work really works. Like the healing I'm seeing with a lot of my sexual abuse clients, or clients who have suffered sexual abuse, is profound in a way that I haven't experienced with other modalities. It's not just another thing in my toolbox. It's something that actually works. And as I said, I like to stick at this point. I haven't been doing it for that long, but I really like to stick to the practice. Having said that, just to speak to what Daniel said at the very end of his little talk, it is serious. Like, I didn't come into this flippantly, and nonetheless, I was taken apart and dismantled and then put back together by the training. If you don't have time in your life to be taken apart and put back together, then make time, or like make peace with that. It's really serious work. The ancestors mine are funny and all the things, but we're dealing with big forces, because behind the individual ancestors are all the big forces of the deities and the cultural forces and the land and, the great cosmic spirits. So I take this work incredibly seriously, and I offer an enormous amount of respect to my people and the ancestors of my clients. Just to speak very briefly to the interweaving, as I said, I have these different strands of practice, and as an acupuncturist in the lineages that I work as an acupuncturist, I also, I'm very grateful for this work and this training, because it's offered me a way to engage with the different lineages of that practice. It's also offered me a way to engage with working on country. So what I mean by that, for people who aren't familiar with that phrase, is just the respect I offer for the First Nations people and this land, this great southern continent. And so as an ancestral lineage healing practitioner, I feel that I can come to that work with a lot more respect as well. I'm going to close there. Thanks.
Thanks, Melissa. I want to appreciate one thing you said, especially. I put it in the chat earlier, but we don't, as practitioners, you're not like speaking on behalf of your clients' ancestors ever. You're helping them to relate with their own ancestors and to restore that relationship. And so you don't need to be psychic or whatnot to do the work. It's not like that. And in that way, we're working on behalf of the well and healed ancestors of the client. to try to help the client to come back into alignment with their vision of the client's best life. And when you share that it's brought you back into relationship with Judaism, and like it touches me to hear, you didn't say it quite like this, but like if I can be in a good way with your your Jewish grandmas, and they're just like, oh, thanks for bringing her back in just a little, we like that, or then and something's working. That's the point. Yeah. And so I feel happy for you, happy for them. We get to enjoy you more. So thanks, Melissa. And thanks for your persistent agitation about things being accessible for people in Oceania, Australia, New Zealand, etc. We're in a 4-year cycle. This will be the third of the fourth year, part of the cycle, that is what a chicken tractor is. It's like moving the little focus around the world to try to encourage the work to break out of a US-centric paradigm and actually really accomplish true international collegiality and diversity in the network. And so we started with Europe, North Africa, West Asia, and this current training that's underway is Africa and the diaspora. This next one will be Asia and Oceania, and we'll complete with the Americas. And the main thing with that is that all the continuing education offerings in the series will be from folks from that region, that they're going to be centering Asian and Oceania voices, concerns, issues, dynamics, and then the events are aimed to be more accessible to folks in that region. So if you're in India, Australia, Singapore, or wherever you might be, that it's a priority that the training be especially accessible to you, timing-wise, in the coming cycle. And finally, our scholarship resources are heavily weight people either in those areas or with strong ancestral ties to those areas. So, and it's still a mixed cohort. In the first 2 cycles, about half the people in each of those were from the regional focus. So a lot of different European folks, a lot of different African descended folks in the current cohort. So that's how the mix plays out. Let me leave it at that and appreciate Orson.
Thank you, Daniel. Really, really pleased to be here with everybody today. Just take a moment to express some gratitude to you, Daniel, and the blood lineages, the spiritual and professional lineages that you're tied to that helped create this framework. It's just been really, really transformative in my life, personally and professionally, on so many levels. To situate myself a little bit, I'm here on the land of the Council of the Three Fires outside of Chicago in the United States. My peoples come from all over the globe. I have a long, long list, but most recently from Guyana in the Caribbean, as well as Southern Africa. And my peoples come from West African populations brought to the Americas via the transatlantic slave trade, indigenous Africans from the Southern Cape in Central Africa, South Asia, the Indonesian archipelago, various European countries. So lots and lots and lots of different rich lineages that are here with me today. I'm also a psychologist professionally. I've been doing kind of more Western-oriented mental health work for over 2 decades, and really have been on a path of trying to decolonize my work. And that is what initially kind of, I think, opened me up to just looking for other ways of doing this work, of healing. Personally, but also professionally, also seeing so many of my clients bringing these big unresolved pains, traumas to the work, collective trauma, generational trauma, and starting to realize that the Western approaches that I had been taught and had been using just had so many limitations in terms of really getting to those layers. And so initially I was very fortunate to come across a practitioner just to do sort of my own personal work around, being, the descendant of this very rich lineage, those that perhaps, were oppressed in some ways, and those that did the oppressing, and how to sort of reconcile these, these very divergent kinds of experiences in this body, right? And so worked with a practitioner for a little while, and very soon thereafter, I learned that my father was dying. What I found is this work really helped me usher my father into, kind of the ancestral realm. And it helped me kind of metabolize the grief that I had been sitting with and that my family had been sitting with related to his transition. So lots and lots of synchronies, I think, in this work in terms of how things kind of unfold. And at that time, I hadn't really thought seriously about doing the practitioner training, but the more and more my own ancestors sort of came back online in a very conscious way, the more I felt called, as Alicia and Melissa sort of spoke about, to do this work. There are many ways that I think ancestral lineage healing kind of facilitates or has helped to facilitate cultural healing, both for myself as well as my clients. Alicia, you kind of mentioned this in your share, but it's a very liberating framework. It's a framework that helps us to really think about different ways of being in this world, different ways of relating to ourselves, to each other, to the land, really thinking outside of the current cultural norms and the current cultural systems that we're living under. As a Black-bodied individual, as a racialized individual in this society, people see that part of my identity as a very kind of overshadowing aspect of identity, right? And so ancestral lineage healing has helped me really expand my notion of identity, my affinity to the land, my affinity to the elements, to other spiritual deities that perhaps have been affiliated with my lineages. And I see this in my work with clients too. It sort of allows people to really step out of the boxes that our culture has put people in. So that's been incredibly healing. I also find that, for myself, as well as the clients that I work with, so many come with, individual trauma, but also this really big cultural trauma of experiences like, living through the transatlantic slave trade, or being colonized, or being the colonizer as well, and the slave owners. And the framework has created a container to really metabolize and process that collective grief in a way that I haven't really found in sort of more Western approaches. Personally, what I found is that as I did healing work with my own lineages, I was more and more able to allow the grief and allow the rage to really flow and metabolize I've been sort of sitting with all of this pain in this one body. But as my ancestors came online, I was able to share that. They were holding it with me. And that's a really powerful technology to offer clients and ourselves around healing from these sorts of cultural traumas. Several of you have already talked about kind of the cultural belongingness aspect, right? And so many of us have been disconnected from our ancestral lands and our ancestral cultures. And this is one way that's helped me and my clients really bring that back online, bring that sense of belongingness to place, to land, to cultural traditions back online. I also think that many of us, myself and many of the clients that I work with, are really interested and passionate about doing cultural change work, right? Making this world that we currently live in a better place. And we do that in different ways, through healing, through activism, through, just being a citizen in this world. And I think that as, for me personally, as my ancestors became well and luminous, and I was more consciously aware of the strengths and the gifts and the wisdom that they offer me and the world, I was able to sort of more consciously bring those gifts and that wisdom to the social justice work I was doing and I am doing, and helping clients to do that as well. So I think that's been a really, really powerful part of the work for me. As a psychologist who's done more Western-oriented work, in terms of the integration here, I think what I'm noticing is this idea of a very liberatory approach. When I consciously even approach my traditional psychotherapy work through this lens, kind of even as just a therapist, sitting in a room doing therapy, but very consciously backed by my ancestors, it sort of shifts a lot. It shifts the energy in the room. It shifts, it sort of encourages this idea that the client and their ancestors are kind of the experts. I'm not the expert, sort of hands over that power and that agency to them. And of course, I'm holding space and I'm holding the frame, but that's been a really, really interesting part of the work for me. And of course, doing therapy work involves creating a container, a safe space, right? And so when we can enlist and invoke our ancestors to be a part of that space making, that space just feels very solid, feels very safe, it feels very well held, And I think even, for those traditional psychotherapy clients that I work with that have conscious relationships with ancestors, we can bring those ancestors into our therapy sessions. We can use them in terms of that healing work. My client can bring their presenting concerns and their life challenges to their ancestors, and we can, they can dialogue with their ancestors, and oftentimes their ancestors offer them, some really solid guidance. So that's one way that I'm beginning to integrate some of the work that I'm doing, with ancestral healing clients that then maybe become therapy clients. Let's see. Yeah, I think, yeah, the other thing I'll just say too is just relational attachment is such a important part of wellness. And this just offers, our ancestors offer us another very, very deep relational connectedness that that offers a lot of wellness. I think I'll end there, and I'll, if there's any questions afterwards, I'm happy to dive in further. I could speak on and on and on about this, but
it's great, Orson. Yeah, I appreciate you. I appreciate what you're bringing, and I would just underscore another favorite kind of person as a mentor to see step into the training is someone who's deeply committed to work for cultural change, systemic change, cultural healing by whatever name. And either they're getting burnt out or they're just like, damn, something about the way I'm approaching this is not quite as potent as it could be. And they're not yet, consciously at least, tapped into the underlying layers of what they're working at. Like they're working at it, but there's not yet a framework to know how to get at and navigate safely the big intergenerational currents, the ways that the trauma that they're carrying is not personal, it's inherited. And so it's not going to get resolved personally. It doesn't get resolved personally. And so there's a need to call in bigger forces, but there's not yet a framework to know how to do it. And therapy creates a lot of good conditions for that, but then doesn't necessarily have all the pieces to enact it when it's clearly intergenerational in nature, which so much what we're working with is. So yeah, I appreciate your your service and the way you're blending the work into your practice there and helping people. So thanks so much. And let me turn over to Daphne, and then we'll open it up for questions and see where the energy wants to go. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. I'm really enjoying this. So my name is Daphne Fatter. A little bit about me. So I am situated here on the unceded lands of the Comanche, Wichita, Caddo, and Kikuku peoples, which is present-day Dallas, Texas, in the United States. And my people are predominantly Western European in terms of my ancestry. So Irish, German, Swiss, as well as British and Scandinavian. And I came to this work, I'm really enjoying hearing kind of what pulled people. So I applied for the training back in 2019, fall of 2019. And the training that I was in was the first cohort that was offered online because it happened literally right as the pandemic hit the United States. Which was wild timing. And I really came to this work more in my own personal journey, just particularly spiritually. And so felt this tug to do the practitioner training. I am a licensed psychologist. I've had a private practice for a long time. I had no intention or idea of how this work was going to emerge in my life. I really came to it more in that kind of personal pull of like, there's something pulling me into this training. And it has completely transformed my professional life and then also just my personal world. So similar to Orson, additionally, I'll mention, I think I'll speak to the personal first. I think as a therapist, particularly through the pandemic and recovering from kind of burnout from that, I have found this work to be so helpful in maintaining connection because I'm connected to my people, I'm connected to my guides. It's helped me so much with energetic boundaries, which I realize being in this field, particularly in the psychotherapy world, I thought I had good boundaries, and I'm like, oh no, for ritual practice, through the training that I learned, but also just from my guides showing me and practicing over and over and over again has helped me have really clear energetic boundaries now with my clients that I really did not have before, to help me really step back and lean out and move out of my caretaker parts and my feeling like I got to do everything parts, feel like responsible for everything. So really actually has helped me be so much more present, I feel like, with my clients to the emergent process of whatever emerges in the space relationally. And also similar to what Orson said, um, really being present to that all my clients are also bringing their people as well. Their ancestors are present with us in that relationship. So boundaries, for my own personal boundaries, this work has been incredibly healing for me personally, which has also shown up for me professionally. For me, in terms of how I've integrated this with practices I was already doing as a therapist, I do a lot of Western trained therapy models, one of which is internal family systems. And that with that modality, I emergently things have shown up through this work that have been very unexpected, that have really shifted my sort of professional offerings. I do integrate ancestral, I follow the protocol of ancestral lineage healing, but I'm able to hold that and kind of weave it in through trauma work that I'm doing, whether that be working with internal family systems, also I do EMDR, which is another trauma treatment, evidence-based trauma treatment in the Western scope of things. And I have some clients that now ask, okay, every session we now want to call in the ancestors before we begin, that this is really, my clients are wanting more and more integration with sort of traditional psychotherapy. And similar to what Orson said, I have found this to help people access wisdom and resilience and healing and spaces within themselves and in that connection with their ancestors that has not been accessible in any other modality that I've ever done and practiced with my clients. I mean, it just is definitely honoring the unseen world and the mysteries of the connection with the guides. And similarly to what, to kind of echo what Orson was saying, I found, particularly with attachment trauma, this to be so incredibly healing for my clients. Really, for one, just even learning to receive and being able to receive relationally from the guide and being really feeling what it feels like to be down lineage and to actually approach the guide as a mentor and be a mentee in the world has been transformational. I mean, not only for me, but for my clients. So I've also brought it into grief work. So I do a ton of grief work as well professionally, and found it to be to help people access just a realm of healing that it's just beyond words in my experience. And I think, the piece around belonging, and I know for me, I also am an active social justice advocate, and it has helped me, particularly as a white-bodied person in an American context, with colonial ancestors, really have such a different felt sense of what cultural humility is, and approaching the world and my colleagues and my clients, and from a very different seat, I think, that I was sitting in prior to this training. And I've done a ton of training. I've done a lot of training. So this training, I feel like, has been really, has brought just bringing in the ancestors is just life-changing. I mean, I would speak to it all day, but it's really, it's been very transformational for me personally. I think it's helped me learn how to use my voice in the world in a different way, with much more confidence, and also with humility that is very clear on cultural repair and healing. Yeah, so I think I'll pause there for now.
Thanks, Stephanie. I really appreciate your like steadiness and the way you're integrating the work into the clinical psych world and internal family systems, and yeah, just appreciate your steadiness and the sense of I have the impression you're doing a lot of sessions there and like actually just delivering a lot of service and getting a lot of experience from the work and the years that you've been doing it. So thanks for holding it down for people. And yeah. So we got half an hour here. Let's open up the questions. And I want to speak to a few succinctly that have come through, but I don't want to just monologue because there's a lot of interesting folks with things you probably want to share here. I do want to speak to how much the training costs. Someone asked that. It's a great question. So I'll say the number up front and then I want to unpackage it. The cost of the full training is $7,500 US. And for some folks, that might be like, oh, that's actually like, it seems like a big substantial training. That seems very reasonable. For other folks, that's like, damn, like I probably never have had that much in the bank ever. And I definitely don't make even a part of that in half the year. Like, it's just like, that's way too much. Let me just zone out upon hearing it. So hang with me. Let me unpackage it for a minute. What we've done every year of the training is basically very explicitly say, for one, I know we're in a more robust economy here. I'm not there anymore. I live in Spain. Over in the United States, it's a more robust economy. It's not bad in Spain either. And then there's all the things about access to money and the way that dovetails with race and gender and, you know, like all kinds of other factors. So it becomes culturally complicated about who has money. So if you can pay, we invite you to pay the full amount, and you can spread it out over 2 years, and that's about $300 a month, if you think of it in that way. And if you can't pay, then you ask us for what you need, and we'll see if we can do it. Especially, but not only, if you're from the region of focus, if you're from ancestries have been historically marginalized, if you bring other than English language capacities in, if you you have a strong calling with the work and you're leaned in with it, if you are of service to other underserved populations, if you're bringing something that's not already represented in the network, we're going to be favorably disposed to that. And so every year there have been people who have paid roughly nothing. Not that we can run the business like that, but if you're a good fit, like I don't think like a businessman, I think like a ritualist. My whole team every year has been like, dude, don't give the training away. We can't run the organization like that. I'm like, okay, Ryan. And so we balance it out because it's spirit guided work. So, which leads me to my next thing, and what it includes without going way into it. There's 3 like practice intensives where you end up being in small group work with different mentors. So you have a lot of contact with different practitioners. And there's a ton of different trainings and talks and teachings and all that. There's also one-on-one mentorship. So you have a designated, like more senior experienced practitioner that you're working with as a mentor who's tracking you closely. We have like a file on you where all the different people who work with you make notes on what your growth edges are so that we can track how to be helpful to you and to help you to like get personalized support to rock the work in the world and be like an awesome you at what you're doing. And so it's personalized in terms of the training part. And about whether or not to apply, what I would say is if you don't really feel a calling around it, you probably shouldn't, even if you think it's a good idea. Even if you're like, yeah, I should probably do it because it'd be another thing to do and all that. It's going to be really hard for you if you don't have the backing of your people. That can shift, but it's a ritual thing. Sure, we need to make a whole like container around it. This is professional training and sign the agreements for them, but it's a ritual process in that way. And if you do have a calling, but you're like, I don't know if I can do the things or this or that, consider that it's possible that a way would open. And consider that if the juice is there, the energy for it is there, but you just don't know how the practicalities are going to work, take a step toward it, see if we can be helpful. Like there's a lot of ways that will work to make it happen if the spirits want it to happen. That's how we're moving over here, in that way. So like that. Finally, and then we'll open it up for questions. The prerequisites, there's like 3 prerequisites that you would need to have done by the end of September to actually join the training, assuming you apply, assuming we work out the exchange, assuming you're accepted and all those things. One of them is you need to take the Ancestral Lineage Healing online course at some point. If you've taken it before, it's fine. If you haven't, they need to sign up for it. And because I covered the steps really thoroughly there, because it's a great resource, because you can hear the practices you would learn to guide for others in a recorded form. And there's a lot of just reinforcement and knowing of the process that comes through that resource. And we have scholarship options, and we're especially flexible if you are applying to the training. So the cost isn't going to be an obstacle with that if the cost is a thing for you to join. You need to take the online course. And you need to do some sessions with somebody. We ask you to do 4 sessions at least. More is better, but you need to have actually experienced the work to train in integrity. And maybe you've done the work in some other format, so you really know what we're doing, but you just haven't necessarily done one-on-one session work. You still need to do one-on-one session work and have an experience of being a client. It's important. You could fulfill that requirement in a few weeks if you wanted to. There's a lot of great practitioners. There's a ton of practitioners who offer low-income sessions if you need that as part of their training or beyond, just because they do it, because they want to. And if you speak in other than English language, the work's probably offered in that language. May not be, but there's a lot of choices there. And then finally, you need to have at least 2 of your lineages in a healed state by the time we begin. Because the training isn't primarily about your personal work. It's about learning how to guide the work for others. So if you're just like, I'm totally new to this, I love it, I'm into it, I want it for my own life, great. Steep in it a little bit longer. And then wonder if it is a good move for you to vocationally train in how to guide it for others. Like you go to a restaurant you like, you don't have to work there. And you can just like enjoy the food, so to speak. Like the training is like how to guide it for other people. And so make sure that checks out. And most importantly, nobody is cleared in the training to guide session work for people outside the cohort, because there's a lot of exchanges that happen as part of the training. To actually guide sessions outside the cohort for the public, you need to have at least 4 of your lineages in a really healed state. So a lot of the training process is about making sure your own ancestors are well themselves, or at least that's foundational. Some of that can happen during the training process itself. But we need to have at least a baseline of wellness, and that you know what the work is, you're acquainted with it. It's also because if you step in and you're doing all your own inner work and learning how to guide it for others, you're going to be a mess, really. I mean, it's going to be you'd be all disorganized. So like, it's good to pace that out a little bit. You can move kind of quick with it, but not that quick. So those are the prerequisites, all of which are doable by the fall. If you're like, I want in on this, well, that's what it would look like. Actually fill out the application and then do the prerequisites. Yeah. And the Ancestor Lineage Healing course is coming up. This starts in late June, is the last time to be able to complete that course if you haven't done it yet before the training starts in the fall. Hence the timing of the talk today. So I see Dr. Paula has a question. And if any of the folks asking questions want to direct it to one of the guests, that's great too. But yeah, go ahead if you would, Paula.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited about the program. I'm sorry I'm not on camera. I'm not feeling too well today. But
okay.
I have started the reading and I'm a little unclear. Maybe the prerequisite training would be where I get my answer in terms of the two lines being somewhat healed, and what does that really mean? I'm not clear about what this language means at this point. And what I found interesting or find interesting is I've had some experiences in my travels to West Africa with ancestors, not afraid of it, but kind of curious as to why this is coming or has come to me. And so I'm really excited. I'm also a therapist, and I get to see things that other people don't see. I know you all can probably understand that. And I'm like, well, who is that person and what does that person mean? So if you could help me to understand the healing of the lines, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. What I mean by that, what we mean by that is that on at least 2 lineages, you have, so there are 5 foundational steps in the lineage healing process. It means you, and I'll just say what, I'm not going to talk through all the steps now, but the heart of it is that you've connected with typically much older ancestors on those lineages, come into direct relationship with them, really healed and vibrant elders, and partnered with them in a way that they're bringing that healing energy that they are and that they emanate and they carry to any on the lineage who lived after them, all the way down the line through to the most recently deceased people, often a grandparent, your parent, if you have children who've died, like the recent known ancestors. So you know that not only the elder ones, but the more recent dead on that lineage are deeply at peace. They're settled with the ancestors. They're functionally in a healed condition. They're ancestralized. They've gone home. They're in their status as ancestors, not just people who've died. And you feel their blessings moving through you. You know that they have your back. The lines of communication are open. You have a sense of what their gifts or their medicine are for your life. Like that lineage is not troubled. When you look at it intuitively, you're like, the road is clear. My people are here right now. I feel them with me. They move through me, no problem. On at least 2 lineages. So that's the basic sense. And this approach is working on a lineage level of scale. So we acknowledge that you might relate with individual ancestors, and you can relate with the ancestors as a big collective or group, but there's an advantage to working at least some with an intermediate level of scale of a particular bloodline. And so we're working within that system to bring about a healing or repair, which then can emanate out and expand out from there. And to what you're speaking to about, and just alluding to traditional ways of relating with the ancestors. Yeah, that's been an important part of study in my own life. I'm a student of West African Orisha tradition and initiate in Ifa and Batala and Oshun and Oshugbo and Egungun and some things in Yoruba culture. Not like a strong lineage carrier in a super trained way, but an initiate and so acquainted. And And that and other parts of my training have helped me to just log in hours of time and ritual around people who never broke their own culture, or they never had their culture broken by outsiders. And the intact traditions of ancestor reverence and ritual are really dynamic. They have a lot to transmit and a lot of goodness. And this particular approach is rooted in an ethic of repair, in the sense that a lot of what we're doing with the work is getting clients or ourselves or groups to a level where the culture is not off track anymore. The ancestors are like dynamically alive in the present. That's the square one where a lot of traditional cultures are already operating. And so in a sense, we're trying to get out of ancestral deficit to be able to just hang in like a peer space with people who don't have the same level of cultural interruption to begin with. In that way, like when I explained to my, and feel free others to ask questions as well. I don't want to monologue the whole time, so you can raise a hand or drop it in the chat. But when I try to explain with my teacher in West Africa about the work, I mean, he gets the principles of it, but it is also just like, man, like, what'd you guys do over there? It's like a mess. I know you don't have a need for it in the same way. You do, like, it's not that there aren't challenges there. It's not just like 500 years of systemic cultural breakdown that are a chapter that came after that breakdown in Europe, and then it got exported and all the things. So the level of need and what specifically is needed is going to vary from place to place. Some people are just a generation or two removed from really intact traditions of ancestral reverence. And they're just like, wait a minute, I need to get this reoriented. Yeah, that's easier. Okay, good. I'll scan the chat to see what questions are there, but also feel free to raise a hand. It can sometimes be a little more connective in that way too. What kinds of foundational skills or ritual skills might a person want walking into the training? The way I think of it, and I think Shannon Willis, who's the ritual director and a fantastic person, you might drop the "Who Are We" link in the chat if you want, Michael. The way we think of it, and the other people doing the interviews, it's not so formalized, but you kind of need at least, I don't know, 2, if not 3 out of 5 of some core things to have like really solid ritual skills, really solid cultural ethics and understanding of what the hell's going on with systemic oppression, be really psychologically worked through, have really good character, and to be really sincere and committed and humble and reliable. Or to have a really strong calling and like not really be sure what to do with all the other stuff. Like, you want to have some combination of those. The calling is important. You can come in and you're like, I am super culturally white and really haven't done any inquiry into the history, but I'm humble and kind and I'm doing my work and I'm totally willing to learn. Like, okay, the group field can metabolize a handful of people of that background and still be coherent. It can't be all that, but it can be a little bit of that. And then other people are like, I am like, whatever, you get my point. People have a really different background. If you happen to not have strong ritual skills, hopefully you've done some therapy and you've located yourself culturally and you have good character. For example, like you can learn 2 out of the 3 things along the way. But if you don't have any of those, it'll be like, I'll come back next year, keep cooking, no problem. You're going to get knocked around too much by the training if you don't have some of that. Yeah. Good. Any of the practitioners who are here, because I see a number of people who've done the training, they're just like laughing at that comment. Feel free to say anything if you want to. It's fine. I see EI laughing, but it's fine. Do you want to say it? ahead if you want.
I think I like the bit about being knocked around too much, in the sense that the training is so powerful in how it impacts on you. There's so much that can catch you off guard. There's I came in with a big ego, thinking, yeah, I've got this. I know. I've got the traditions, culturally, and but my people said, nah, that's not how it works. Settle down. And 2 years down the line, I think that is now, my life has changed, and I see them in my life every day. In ways that I wouldn't have noticed before I did the training. So the training will always have, Ancestral Medicine itself, the organization, will always have a special place in my heart, because they created the vessel for me to connect with my people in a way that I can only encourage you, if you have any sense that I feel what they're saying. I don't know anything about it. I'm not sure how it's going to show up. But if you feel something, is that something? As therapists, when you're working with clients, you want to connect. When there's a little opening, you kind of connect. That's how I saw it, that there was a little opening, and I connected. So thank you. I hope that made any sense.
It's great. Yeah. I was so happy to hear from you. I remember our early interactions, like, who is this Oyimbo speaking in the Yoruba? Like, wait, I speak just a little bit of Yoruba, but it's enough to be like, what is going on here? It's great. Somebody asks in the chat, two people actually asked, what's the relationship of this to family constellation work? So I haven't trained in constellation work. I haven't been a client in it. I don't know that much about it. People, of course, have brought it up a ton over the years. I've chatted with practitioners about it, and a little bit. Some folks in the network have, practiced it. But from afar, I'll share my impression from afar, is that Bert Hellinger seemed to be a brilliant person who drew some influence to some degree. I don't think he was trained per se in South African Sangoma work, but drew some influence there apparently. And but what I would say is different from what I can gather is this work emphasizes ritual safety a lot. Like the idea of embodying another person's ancestors, we don't do it like that. And embodying someone who's not yet healed among the dead, we definitely don't do it like that. And so not all, but some ways that constellation work seems to be practiced does not have enough ritual safety involved in it. And so I end up hearing a lot of reports of like, whoa, I did some constellation work and had threw up and had headache for 3 days or whatever. And other people will be like, it was great and it worked well for me. So it's not my place to generalize about a whole modality, with a lot of people holding that modality in different ways now. But it seems at times that the ancestors are related with more like a knowing field or like a general kind of force rather than other people. The ancestors are real. They are as real as you and I. That's the baseline for what we're doing. This is fundamentally ritual work. It's sacred work. It has psychological implications. And that's how we move with the work, period. And so there's not enough ritual safety sometimes in constellation work. And also we're trying to contact, and we are coming into relationship in the practices with the much older ancestors. And so there's a very explicit foregrounding of like cultural harm and cultural trauma and things like that. There are people doing that in constellation work and doing a brilliant job with it. But it's different a bit in that way. And I'm cautious about when to embody physically the ancestors. That only happens with one's own ancestors, and only when they're very healed, and only in a way that's regulated and consensual for the living person. So the dead who are not yet well can cause things like distress, physical illness, premature death, accidents, and bad shit, basically. So you don't mess around with it. And it doesn't mean that the work is fear-based. It just means that there's appropriate precautions. So I'm working as a ritualist with a psychology background. So I hope that speaks to that. And let me be clear, I don't mean to throw shade at constellation work. I don't know it that much. And I'm sure there's people doing awesome work with it. But so far as I could tell, those are the things where there's difference, where the practice differs. I'm more cautious and safety oriented over here. Yeah. Great. Lila? Yeah, we didn't know if I'm saying your name well. Yeah.
Yeah, Lila. Yeah, that's correct. Thank you. Yeah, no, I just wanted to speak to what you've just said about family constellations, because I've had a recent experience with that, and I do believe that it really is about there's a necessity for some grounding before the work is done. When my constellation was done within this group, we was looking at my grandfather, who, you know, he was an Obeah man basically, but he was working negatively. He wasn't healing, he was harming. And what happened to the individuals within that session was that people were literally becoming unwell. They were like sinking to the floor. They were talking about feeling a hot energy and heaviness. And it wasn't just the people who were involved within the constellation, but the observers were moving and going to a window for air and stuff. So yeah, I left that experience feeling, yeah, there's something about having that grounding at the beginning and the calling in of the ancestors and guides for support. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, thanks. Look, I don't want to speak bad about constellation work per se, but what I would say, and it's funny that I would have to say it, is like, if the ancestral healing approaches that you or those you know are engaging in don't include the ancestors, be wary of them. If they don't include the ancestors and in a way that recognizes that the ancestors are real and have their own agency and personalities and like imbalance, like being dead doesn't make you wise, it makes you not incarnate. And so we need to have just discernment with the dead. So if the approaches don't bring that sense of respect for the reality of the ancestors and a need for discernment, then ask more questions. Be like, what is this rooted in? Is this rooted in like a sense of real respect for the elements at play here? And I know people who are ritualists who have incorporated constellation work and they account for those factors and they do a great job with it. But I'm just like, if you're not a ritualist who's like talking to the dead, maybe don't professionally guide ancestral healing services until you actually have those relationships happening in your own life. That's all. Otherwise, you're making a mess of it. There's plenty of mess. We don't need to add to it. Yeah, that's all. Good. Anybody else have questions about, Lulu?
Hi, thanks, Daniel. I'm in the north of England on the border with England and Scotland. I've got a couple of questions. One is, like, what's the general size of the cohort? And then a second question is around, I know that on your courses you generally have groups for LGBTQI and BIPOC. So do you have those groups within the training, or is it opened up so that we get a really deep understanding of those systemic issues that we're dealing with? I'm particularly interested in the the LGBTQI, because I've got a child who's non-binary and into the trans world, so I'd be really interested in opening up that aspect.
Yeah,
for
great,
myself.
great. I'm happy to speak to it. The current cohort 6 is 40 people. The cohort 5 was big. We had 80 people. And cohort 4 is like 30. The 2 before that were 30 people. We have plenty of staff and the ratios to accommodate a larger group. But if I had to predict, I would say we'll probably end up with 40 to 50 people in the coming cohort. And what is especially, what matters more, I think, is what are the ratios? Because I think we'll have, I think cohort 5 was bigger, or I know it was bigger, but I think it was actually more connective than the cohort before it because we had better ratios. And meaning when you end up in your mentorship pod, we have one pod that's 10 people, but mostly it's like seven or 8 people. So you have some group meetings that way. But there's a lot of one-on-one meeting with your mentor as well. I think there's 5 meetings like that. And then when we do the practice intensives and you have you guide sessions for another practitioner with someone else witnessing and tracking what you're doing and a trained supporter there to give feedback. So when that happens, that's always in groups of 4. It's you and 2 other practitioners with the trained supporter being like, so what you doing? You know, how's it going? You did that great. Here's a point of polish. Let us put it in the notes. So the next person that watches you next week knows what to track for. And so the ratios are small and conducive to learning in that way. But that's about the cohort size. About it, the second question, it's a big layered good question. It's a mix of truly multicultural space and then what people call differently like caucus, or it's not really caucus, affinity spaces or identity-based spaces by whatever name. And so we had in cohort 5, for example, we had a all German speakers group, all Spanish speaker group, and then all Black, or we had a BIPOC group and all Asian ancestor people group and LGBTQ only group. And any one of those identities can just be in any other group. It's an option. It's never like, you're of this identity, you must be in this group. It's not like that at all. But some people feel more at ease in that way, and it supports the learning. That's for the mentorship spaces. Then in the practice intensives, the rotations, we tend to create the option. We've started to do this more explicitly for BIPOC only exchanges. Like in our last retreat, it was helpful for the group, which is, remember, it's Africa in the diaspora is the focus this year, that all the people of African descent, unless they wanted it to be otherwise, were in an all Black space. And that created some ease for a lot of people, and understandably. And we have the staffing to provide for that, and that's fine. And then other people are like, yeah, we could have that, but we don't need it, and we want to mix it up a bit. And then so that's fine. So we can provide for it. And also we encourage, people have really different needs around that. Some people, it's actually good for them to risk and navigate the contact with people of lots of different backgrounds. And other people haven't necessarily had the cultural ease of a shared identity space. And it's really nourishing and nice to have a break from the whiteness or from the cis heteronormativity or whatever it might be. And so that said, if you're like, I'm here, I really want to go deeper on this theme of adoption or around gender non-binary, trans, queer ancestors, etc., or this or that. When you join the training, for one, you have access to a whole archive of past teachings from all the previous years, which include teachings, like 3 or 4 of them in the archive already are on like gender, queer, everything, and the ancestors. So there's teachings on that you have automatic access to. Also, some of the mentors, some of the supporters, there's a lot of folks in the network who have that lived experience, expertise, and knowledge. So you can just seek them out and be like, I want to go deeper around this theme. And then you seek that out, and that gets brought out. It's important, not that you're suggesting this, but someone you could kind of cautiously hear wanting to work your own growth and learning edge through their lived experience or something. It's like, oh, I really want to do exchanges with trans folks, so then I know about that lived experience. Which is both okay in a way, but also we wouldn't want to have the learning come at the expense of someone else, so to speak. So there's always that balance, right? And I hope I tried to speak to some of that. There's a lot of resource for what you're speaking to in the network. Let me, sorry to be brief with it, let me pause to notice the time. I don't mind hanging out a bit to answer a few other questions, but I want to take a moment to really appreciate Alicia and Melissa and Orson and Daphne, some of whom have other humans to serve in their busy days. And so let me see if there's not a need per se, but if there's anything any of you want to say by way of weaving out, if you need to go, you're welcome to. Otherwise, just appreciation for you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to have to head out. So thank you, everyone. Just really appreciate the space.
Yeah, thanks, Daphne.
Wonderful to see everyone.
Thank you. Lovely to be with everybody today. Stay in touch. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks so much for joining, and I hope to see some of you in the training. Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah. Thanks, Melissa. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Bye, Daniel.
Alicia.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Yeah. Take care. Lorraine, do you have a question? Yeah. Should be able to unmute.
Hey, hi. I felt very vulnerable around this question, so I thought then ask.
Good.
I'll preface this bit. I've been doing ancestral work for a little while now, and major life goal is to connect, to be more connected to the world and connected to people, just be more connected in general. That said, two of my nephews in the past year decided they could no longer be in this world. And I don't feel suicidal or anything like that, but I understood completely I wasn't mad at them. I didn't even, I just felt very differently about death and their case. And in general now, just like I understand, you couldn't hear. But that said, I feel very drawn to doing this work and other spiritual work, and drawn to doing this type of work. I feel that calling, and everything goes more smoothly when I inundate myself in this world. But I don't think my voice says to me, my intuition says to me that I don't really have what other people need per se. Maybe this work is more for me personally, and not to apply to serve others. So that's my feeling, and I just wanted to put that on the table and see it, and just get some feedback.
Thanks, Larry. Kindness to what you're describing, for one. It's a lot, and and your family's fortunate to have you in terms of looking out for the transition and the well-being of your nephews who passed even after their passage. And so thanks for looking out for them, and that's a lot. I don't presume to know whether or not it would be good medicine for you to train to guide the work for others, but here's what I could say about it. One is that if you took the 2 hours or whatever, maybe more, that it would take to fill out the application, because it's kind of a long application. We've learned that we really like to screen up front. Like if you're a kind of disruptive human, like not in the fun way or helpful way, or you don't have good character, or you're not a good fit, we'd rather all know up front, so we can be like, we wish you well in another direction, and just not have you in the training, because we have such a good thing going on over here. We don't want to, weird it out. So the application is long, but you could do the application and see how that feels. There's no harm in that, for one. Two, sometimes our path takes unexpected turns, and the need is tremendous. Like, I didn't set out to do this with my life, but here I am. And when I try to do other stuff, the spirits are kind of like, it better be really damn compelling, because the need over here remains really great. So unless you have an extremely excellent plan B, why don't you keep doing this? Like, okay, well, I enjoy it, so that's good. And the need is really great. So in that way, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be like, you have a PhD in psychology and a PhD in cultural analysis and deconstructing colonialism and another PhD in somatic everything and whatever. But if you're ethical and kind and willing to learn, you might be a better practitioner than all the PhD people who have all the whatever. Because it's not about that when it comes to actually holding space for a thing. So don't let the ambitious training mind psych you out if there's something that could be valuable. And so the need is great. And also, like, I don't know, like as a mentor, and I know the other mentors feel this way too, ritual skills, space holding skills, cultural knowledge, those things can be learned. They take a minute, but they can be learned. Good character and open-heartedness can also be cultivated, but they're somewhat more difficult to teach. And so if you have good character and you're kind, then it's just like, are you willing to learn some stuff?
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
You hit the nail on the head in terms of being intimidated by the training.
Yeah. Also, like, fuck it about the whole, I need a website, I need to practice, I'm going to need to like spend a third of my life on social media trying to hustle to get clients and all the like, oh, fuck the fucking spiritual industry thing a little bit. And sorry to be like that. And it's because it's a hustle. It's a hustle, and it's distressing. And it comes easier for some people than others. And it sometimes can be a real blessing, and it sometimes can be really distressing to have your livelihood and your calling be tangled up with one another. That's not always an easy thing. And so just like what I would say about that is, if it's good medicine for you to be here, take a step toward it, assess how that goes. And, but don't let the anxiety or the fear about like mixing your personal, professional life and your spiritual life all together, don't let that inherently stop you from stepping towards something that could be good for your life, if it's good for you. Yeah. But it's a thing about having a practice. It comes more easily for some than others. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. We should probably wrap soon. If anyone has any super like, I gotta ask it question, you could probably weave it in, but I'll say that the actual practical bits on how the training works are really in that other video that we did in February. So I didn't want to spend a lot of time with it here. Yeah, come around if you want. We got a good thing going on. And I give thanks to our shared ancestors. Give thanks for the chance to have a meaningful life. I wish that for each of you. And if there's anything we've said or done that's caused a kind of disruption, may it be smoothed over, and may people get what they need from this time here. And blessings again to the folks that were shared and presented, and to their families and their day. So I appreciate you all and hope to hear from you if it's good for you. Thanks for your time and your care. Be well.